So this, you'll see this device in ceramic history in every culture. So I began to use that. I was thinking about this stuff. And so how do you get your eye to move from the spout to back around under the handle? Just big swoopy line that cuts around and moves through it.
Chris, can I ask you a question?
Yeah.
Some of your spouts are a lot lower than the ones historically that are utility. Is that a choice of breaking history for contemporary art, or what's your choice?
That's a choice of not caring. This is, again, a little ceramic history context here. This is 1986, and what started to happen was you had Hadler Rodriguez came to New York City, and they started a big play gallery on 57th Street. Garth Clark shows up the next year, and he has a gallery on 57th Street. And they start showing work that doesn't have anything to do with function. So teapots become kind of teapots became this iconic form of exploration of holding on to a functional concept or construct and then abstracting it. So the construct is a teapot, but it's now, let's see what you can do with it and forget about utility and use. And just see how far you can go. And so in 2016, this is like old news. But in, 1984, 1985, this was like radical. Okay? And so this was like everybody started to flip and ask new questions about what a utilitarian pot can be. And you had this huge explosion of ideas. So imagine a line like that, and everybody in your mind, draw perpendicular to that line in your mind, where you bisect the two sides, right? So by putting a line on a perpendicular, you now have a short side and a long side, and put that perpendicular in a place that you think is kind of pleasing, so that one side is kind of a pleasing relationship to the other. Just do it. Spend 1 second doing it. Okay? And probably most of you in the room did that. There's always somebody who puts it right at the end. And they're going to have trouble the rest of their life. But most people do this. And the reason for that is because of that. Okay, this is an inherent thing, the sense of design that we live with. And just a quick little lesson on this. You take a square and you bisect one side in half. And you do a diagonal to the corner. And then you extend the bottom out. Okay? And then that diagonal becomes a radius of a circle. You put the circle in. Okay, where that circle crosses that bottom line, you then square off, and that is a golden rectangle. Okay, and that's the term for the mathematical term for it is phi. It's a relationship of 1 to 1.618. It's also the Fibonacci series, where if you take 1 and add it to 2, you get 3, and you add 3 to 2, you get 5, and 5 to 3, you get 8, and 8 to 5, you get 13. And you go down the line. And if you divide the higher into the lower, you come out with 1 to 1.619, or 1.618. And Fibonacci, it's a really interesting thing, Giacomo da Vinci. The human body is a perfect golden rectangle in terms of all of its relationships. So you have how your digits are organized. Your forefinger to the length of your full finger is a golden rectangle, 1 to 6.18. And your hand to your forearm, and the forearm to your whole arm, all this stuff, where your eyes are in relation to your head, your forehead in relation to your chin. Our whole body is based on this. Okay? This is why you tend to go towards that when you draw the line and you bisect it. But what's also interesting, the DNA molecule is a perfect relationship of 1 to 1.618. It's when you break it down and you measure it, it's like its linear measurement is 1 to 1.618, and that's on a molecular level. Now, ceramic history is full of this. Okay, so you have this Greek helix cup, and its geometry is that. Okay, so the Greeks were masters of this. They did this in all their work. I use it in my work all the time. I'm always organizing forms based on golden rectangles. I'm taking them units and sliding them in and out and everything. So this is how this one's organized. So that's so one side is a rectangle, golden rectangle, and you stack them and then you slide them across on the other side.
When you throw these, are you throwing it as a centerpiece and then adding more to it, or are you throwing it?
On this one, yeah.
Yeah.
So you take a golden rectangle and you go down in scale, and then you take it and go up in scale, and you connect the dots, and you get a golden spiral. Okay. And you all know this as shells. You know, the whole shell culture is based on this kind of growth pattern. And but the human ear is based on it, and even the cochlea. This is how you hear octave. If you hear a singer who has like a 4-octave range or something like that, or if you hear octaves higher than somebody else, it's simply because you have another twist in your cochlea. Okay, so this is all on an organic level. The iPhone, Johnny Ives, who designs all of Apple stuff, his entire thing is based on golden rectangles. The Apple logo is all based on 1 to 1.618. iCloud. If you tweet, Twitter feed is organized. I mean, you see this in everything. And I was walking in the woods in Nebraska after the last NCCA conference and came across this tree, and it's a perfect golden spiral. Now get back to surfing. Okay. A wave is a perfect golden spiral. The energy of that wave. Okay, so how do you use that in ceramics? What is that about? Well, the American Indians sure knew how to do it. All of those pots you see there like that, those are all golden spirals, that curve, that energy flowing in. It's all rolling back in. So that's why those pots could do that. So the same energy is in that. It's all geometry. And they didn't know anything about this. They just understood the physical world. Now you take a square and put it on a circle and then spin it as you go vertical. So imagine cocktail napkins. Going down, right? So you do that. And in architecture, we see it like this. Or like that. So on the left is the Great Mosque in Iraq, and I hope it's still standing. I don't know if it is. But on the right is a Madonna figure from a church in monastery in Portugal, in Alcobaça, Portugal. And both of them use the spiral to talk about metaphor. Okay, so on the left, you have the secular world down at the ground, then you have the spiritual world up high, and you take the walk, and the walk is transitionary space to move from the everyday to God. And they use geometry in architecture to get you there. Okay, if you've ever walked through a Catholic church, it's the same damn thing. It's a different geometry, but you walk through a space to get to the altar. Okay, and the Madonna figure, it's the same thing. The feet are at the ground and the eyes are God, or where you see God. And they use a spiral in terms of gesture to move you to that space. So these are two examples of two different religions using spirals to talk about something, okay, using design. In the natural world, this is all Fibonacci, relationship of these. This is a gourd from China, drinking gourd, and that's a large intestine. So it's like what I'm looking for is I'm looking for these analogies in work that are found in nature, the human body, and then how to use that information in my work. How do you use a spiral? How do you use this type of movement of your inner to talk about something else? So what started to happen was spirals started to show up in all my work. So that took everything off center, which changed the dynamic of the work. So if you look at these vases, you're looking down on them, there's a big spiral going down the base. And then drawings had started to come out of that, and all of a sudden I couldn't throw this anymore. How do you throw that? You know? So that's when coiling started to come in, because I had to coil the form. So these are pots that came out of that series, and then the vases that came out of that. Okay, now this is 1988, 89, somewhere in there, and chaos theory started to get a lot of play, and all these books started to get published in it. And I believe me, it's like so hard to figure out, you know, like I'm not at all an expert or anything. But when I was interested, I was looking at a lot of fluid dynamics. How does fluid move through a restriction, and what happens when you do that? And this is an image of a liquid system, okay? And you take a stick and you draw a line through it. And what happens is that liquid, it's a viscous material, so it'll move and then it'll stay. And then you take another stick and do it, and it'll move and it'll stay. And it'll take another one, and that's the result of a bunch of drawing through. And we know this in the real world. If you ever looked at a stream, and a rock in the middle of the stream, how water moves around that rock. Okay. Well, in ceramics, we're making volumes, and air is moving in and out of those volumes. Or at least it has the potential to move, right? I mean, there's no wind force moving it. But if you can use form to direct how air might move, you can create kind of visual energy. So I was looking at all this stuff and started to make a bunch of bases kind of based on air moving out, tumbling back on itself and expressing itself out again. So these are bases that came out of that. Y'all know him? Okay, so I used to love this stuff, and you know, so what's happening in my work, this is the moment when I was talking earlier today about, you know, the napkin drawing, and this is what I'm doing, and no, you're not doing that. Well, this is, you know, my work's serious. I'm making serious work, and well, it's kind of goofy too. No, it's not. Yeah, it kind of is. You know, there's this kind of animation in it that is, there's gestures that are comical, they're humorous, they're all this stuff. And I started to see that, so I started to say, okay, let's go for it. Let's not walk this line, let's really go into it. And so these comic books from R. Crumb, specifically his drawings, were all about that kind of sense of caricature. Being serious, but using humor and caricature to talk about something. Okay. So, you know, I was looking at Martha Graham a lot for balance and how the human body, you know, can move in space and go these weird positions, but it's absolutely perfectly balanced. Okay. So I started to do these teapot forms. This is just a monoprint, and then teapots that came out of that. Okay, so going into that animation, going into that caricature, and also balance and all this. So this is early 90s, 91, 92.
So do you still consider those forms as teapot forms?
Yeah. Because again, it has nothing to do with function. It has nothing to do with utility. It has to do with the idea. So the idea of a teapot. Okay, if everybody made teapots, we did an assignment, It's like you make a volume, you make something for a lid, you make a bunch of spouts and choose one to put on, and you make a handle. Okay? That's the construct. Everybody who's ever made a teapot uses that construct to do it. You make this, you make that, put them all together. But what if you say, can the spout be the volume? All of a sudden everything changes. Can the handle be the volume? Do you have to have both an entrance and an exit? And you only have one. You know, it's like you start asking these kinds of questions, and all of a sudden all those rules of making the volume first and then the lid and all this stuff fall apart. Now you have to invent. So again, this is the early 90s. This is when this was, you know, there were like shows on Fifth Avenue of just teapots. You know, and so everybody was exploring this kind of concept. You know, how do you challenge the norm? So what was happening here was a lot of the, you know, everything was kind of soft, right? So I was going through this really soft phase. And I was looking, and at this time, I'm looking at a lot of architecture. You all know this building. This is, by the way, it's like, there's 10,000 golden rectangles in this building. Everything is golden rectangle. But I went to Spain for a sabbatical, spent a lot of time in Barcelona looking at Gaudi. And what I loved was his sense of using the organic against the linear. So he gave edge to the organic. Okay? And everything he does is edge to the organic. And a little later, looking at Frank Gehry. And again, just indigenous architecture, circles and squares. You know, hard edge and circles. Okay? And right here, right at this time, I decided to go to the Azores. So all this stuff is kind of happening at the same time. So I go to the Azores to be part of a huge international symposium. They invited 25 artists from around the world to go to the island of Fayal. They gave us the old military base. You know, we used all the buildings for studios, and they gave us the public works department. So sculptors could use bulldozers and big cranes and whatever they wanted. And the job was to make art, and then the work from that would travel to Lisbon, Madrid, Prague, and London for a show. They did a big catalog and the whole thing. And I get off the plane, I'm the only potter, and I get off the plane, and they're walking me to the cab, and the head guy says to me, "Oh, Chris, we don't have any clay." No clay on the island. No clay. We cannot get clay. And I'm going, holy shit. Now again, context, 1995. The internet isn't in existence, just barely. There's, you know, there's no art store. There's nothing. If you were a painter and came to that symposium, you brought everything with you: paper, paint. You can't buy anything. So there's no. You know, there's no second choice here, you know. So I kind of freaked for a couple of days and then got in a cab, went to the island, went to a bunch of bars and everything. You know. Yeah, a lot of it. And then, you know, just looking at the island, what can I do? What can I make? You know, because I'm a maker. And at the end of the island was this volcano called Volcano del Capelinos. And this blew out of the ocean in 1956 and added another mile of land to the island. And it's a perfect bowl. It's absolutely exquisite. And these are kind of exterior views. And I spent a day sitting in this thing, walking around. And I realized that, you know, I've got all this material right in front of me. So I went to the quarries and just bought big blocks of basalt, of lava, and started carving lava pots. Okay? And so this is the first time in my entire career that I did reductive form rather than acid form. So this is like, what, it took me 25 years to do this? This is kind of like, if you go to college now and your foundations, this is like your first project.
Yeah.
You know, but I never went to foundations. So I started making these lava pots, and where the inside is different than the outside. And came back and then started doing this. So through this kind of wall, another wall, huge shift in the work. And so this is maybe about that big. And where the inside is not the same as the outside, different forms, different movements. Okay, so taking that sense of architecture and Gaudi and edge and, now doing inside versus outside, all this stuff.
Chris, how are you building these? Are you starting with a
Just
room?
exactly what I'm
Same
doing
thing
here.
Okay, and some of it looks very slabby.
Yeah,
So-
no, it's everything is this.
Got it.
And it's an interesting thing. We all think differently. I cannot think in slabs.
Yes, nobody but slabs.
I cannot think in slabs.
Yeah.
And I cannot figure it out. It doesn't make sense to me. It's just the way my mind works. And some people can't think in coils. But all the stuff I'm showing is all made of this. So these begin to get up a little bit in scale. And then another thing happens. It's like you hit this wall where some people call it the UPS wall. It's like when it gets too big to ship to UPS, you've got a problem. Because everything's got to change. It's like it gets a little too big, and the way you send something changes, the way you blaze it changes, the way you fire it changes. It's like it's a domino effect of problems. But up until this point, this is how my work related to the user. The sense of hand touch was about this. It's about lifting up, putting there, touching like that, moving it. There's a certain authority. I don't use it in a pejorative sense. But the user has the authority over the other. Okay. But there's another way that you can have touch, and this is an example of it. It's where the user is equal to the authority is equalized. So the way you touch something becomes completely different. Psychologically, it's completely different. Think of go in your garden and pick a flower, and then go out, then go in your garden and hug a tree. Two different experiences, both growth, both the same thing on some basic level, but you respond completely different to it. So this is about a different sense of touch, and with that touch comes different information. Conceptually it's different. It forces you into a different place in your mind. So this is a Ocotillo in southeastern Arizona where I used to have a house. And that's the scale of it. Okay, so we associate scale with our body. Something's large or small. It's based kind of on us, our sense of hands. Is a cup large or small? A lot of times it's just based on the size of your hand. So these started to just jack up in scale. So I brought everything up to try to create these big forms that you just had to relate to them differently. So this is then fired. So these are like 4 feet by 4 feet kind of thing.
Are these gas fired?
These are all gas fired.
Besides your equipment, do you have paddles?
No. Everything you see me doing here is exactly how I do this.
Now in that picture, are those buttresses essentially those ribs that you have in there? Is that an example of
Yeah, so
what
see
you
that?
talked about earlier?
See that? That gets built out. That's a big rib that comes all the way down, comes up in here. And it connects all of these. So there's a big arch right in here, there's a big arch under there holding that. So everything's doing bam, 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 all going down to there. So that's just like an orifice hanging out. So this is also double wall. So there's a whole interior wall being built at the same time, but you just can't see it in the photograph. So that's the same piece fired.
So are you improvising those shapes as you're building?
Oh yeah. Everything's in the moment. It's all moving in the moment.
How do you place?
Well, that's the UPS factor. Okay, so how do you blaze a big pot inside? So you can't pour it in, lift it up, and pour it out, right? So the way I do it is I bought a pool pump.
I love it.
And you take the pump and put a hose on it, you stick it in a bucket of glaze, and you set the piece on a turntable, and you turn on the pump, and instead of shooting out water, it shoots out glaze. You just spin the piece and you go like this, and you glaze the entire inside, and you turn off the pump, and you have a wet, dry bag next to you, and you take that and stick it inside, suck it all out. So, but see, I mean, it's an interesting question because it's like that's a technical problem that you have to solve if you work large. How do you put glaze on the inside of a large form?
But even on the outside,
The outside's all sprayed.
why wouldn't you spray the inside?
Because I don't know if you've ever stuck your head in a halfway pot to spray, but you get a lot of backlash. It's pretty miserable. You know, so it's like you have to figure out the technical once you move out of the comfortable. Okay, you move out of the comfortable and you'll immediately hit a technical problem. And you either let that technical problem direct your idea or you overcome it and try to figure out how to do it. And we all do that. You hit it many different times in a body of work over a period of years. Something just shifts, you know. So, you know, I can't glaze these in a standard glaze booth. So I built a glazed room, a wall. And I just put the piece right next to it. I'm standing there and there's fans behind me and air is moving this way and I just spread it.
Would you have cracks if you didn't glaze the interior of the wall?
With 95% of the glazes I use, no. But with some, yes. And that's that thermal expansion differential. So, if I only glaze the outside, would I have cracks? Because if you don't only have glaze on one surface, with the outside surface, would there be too stressed for it? And with most of my glazes, it would be no problem. But there is a glaze or two I have that it would be. So these are platters, and I was interested in this. This is like a memory of the foot of a piece on a plaster board. So what I wanted to do, you know when you have a globe, you have the physical globe of the world, but you look in a book and they lay the globe out flat, it's this shape like that. Well, I wanted to take the big pieces and cut them up and lay them down and use that as information for drawing. Deconstruct the three-dimensional into the two-dimensional. And so that started to happen. So my work is all self-referential. It's like one thing feeds into another, which feeds into another. And I'm looking at the membrane thing and how you divide a circle or an oval. So this is like breaking it into thirds. So this is all cone 11 reduction. Butterfly. So what's interesting about insects is you have symmetry, but two different things happening, right? And so taking that idea of a couplet to a conversation between two things and putting them on a platter. So that's the geometry of a butterfly wing, by the way. It's always there. And then the whole series of platters that came out of that. So these are, again, the used process where these are all like latex and waxed and really drawn hard edge, and each little area that's got glaze is glazed by brush or poured on, and there's latex around it, and then you wax over that, and you peel the latex to the surrounding area and you glaze that one. And then you lay down the next one, you know, there's like 10 or 15 different glazes all laid out through this whole thing. It's a real process, and it's all like really hard edge. But I use glazes that run. And so it's to, then you break apart that strategy through just the viscosity of the glaze. So there's a memory of the organization, but it isn't hard. Okay. So this is the mid to late 90s, and we're like building. I built a wood kiln. That's how we stack our wood. That's the kiln. It's the kiln guard. It's the front of the kiln anyway. The anagoma. We have a big shed over the front part of it. And that's how we get ready for the stack. Firing. That's during the side cold bed. But I built the wood kiln, but I wasn't making pots for the wood kiln. I was taking pots I made and put them in the wood kiln. Okay. So that's like, you've got to